As a general manager, what's really great is you get to really start from the foundation. So you're starting with, from anywhere from a reading to, fostering it through to maybe a regional production, then going back to another reading of it, and then fostering it through to maybe an off-Broadway and then off to Broadway. So you're really like with that show for so long, and there's so much dedication, and there's so much that's so great about that development process.
Hi, my name is Megan Jensen, and I'm the Director of Programs for the American Theater Wing, and I'd like to welcome you to the Network for Emerging Leaders in the Theater. The network bridges information and access for emerging theater leaders by providing conversations, insight, connections, and networking opportunities for young professionals interning and working in theater administration roles, both artistic and executive. You can support the American Theater Wing and help us continue to provide free resources like this conversation today to the next generation of arts workers. There is no donation too small. We're sending a link right now via the chat, so you can go ahead and give us a donation or make a contribution by visiting us at americantheaterwing.org.
Hello, everyone. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce our moderator for our conversation today on general management. T. Oliver Reed has spent the past 20 years working on Broadway shows, including most recently Hadestown, Once on This Island, and Sunset Boulevard, among many others, and that have amassed more than 20 Tony Awards. He is an accomplished cabaret artist and multiple-time winner for his solo show, Drop Me Off in Harlem, which he directed, wrote, and starred in. He is on faculty at NYU Tisch and Columbia University School of the Arts. He is also the co-founder and artistic director of Black Theater Coalition. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce, welcome, and turn the conversation over to Mr. T. Oliver Reed.
Thank you, Megan. And I'm coming to you today from a practice room at Rider University. I'm directing a show here and we're teching, so I'm in this lovely practice room. I'm happy to be here for this conversation on the pathway to theatrical general management with these four amazing people. I'd like to introduce them to you. The first is a friend and company manager. This is Miranda Go. And there she is. Hello, Miranda. How are you?
Good.
Good. Next, we have another new and old friend. We're trying to figure out exactly how we know each other from some show. Michelle Tamagawa.
How are you?
Doing well, thank you. And next we have another friend of many years. She's also a general manager, Amy Jacobs.
Thanks for having me.
And last but certainly not least, this gentleman is a new friend and an associate company manager at 321 Management, Man Singh Tina. Man, how are you?
Good, how's it going?
Going well. So I think the first question is the one that everyone always asks, like, how did you get into company general management? I'm going to start with the person I've known maybe the longest, Amy Jacobs. How about you?
All right, I'll take this one. So my story actually goes back to college, where I was a math major and I wanted to be a math teacher. But I always loved theater, and I took lots of theater classes, and I stage managed productions in high school and college. And then, at one point it sort of hit me that I didn't want to just do math my whole life. So I decided to switch majors to theater, and I was going to be a stage manager. But at the time, that seemed like a bit of a crazy idea. This was 20 years ago. And so I thought that I would also take a whole lot of business classes, because that way, if the crazy theater thing didn't work out, I had the business degree to fall back on. So I ended up graduating with a double major in theater and business, but had no idea that there was a job out there that was those two things. And I came to New York, had an internship at a general management office, which I thought was great because I would meet stage managers working on Broadway. And then I sort of saw what general management was, and it had the sort of two things that were my fits. And all of a sudden it was like, I fell into it and have been doing it ever since. So I fell into it, but it was a happy accident.
Michelle, what about for you?
Yeah, I I came into the company management / general management world in a pretty unconventional way. I was, not really. I was a theater goer. I enjoyed theater, but I wasn't really particularly, a theater active, folk. But I went to school and graduated in management information systems, and didn't really have any particular theater background or any particular, genre of acting or stage managing, any of that sort. However, during during college, I used to work on the side as event coordinator. And so through event coordinating and event managing, I was able to connect with a particular company that produced Broadway shows and touring shows in several different markets. And they were in the need to look for someone. And through a contractor that I'd worked with one of my events, he had reached out to me to see if this would be anything of interest. And I told him, to be honest with you, I don't have any theater background. I know very little except for what I've seen on the stage as an audience member, but I'm willing to learn and, looking forward to trying something new. And as luck would have it, they did take me on, and I had a really great mentor in that. And through there and through meeting a lot of different company managers through presenting Broadway shows, I was able to meet a few company managers on the road, and that's how I segued over from the presenting Broadway series and shows to the company side of things. So I started out as an assistant company manager and worked my way up through as an associate and a company manager. And then the more traditional route for a general manager would be, or for a company manager would be going the general manager route, which was the tail end of the more conventional way of how I got here.
And for Miranda and mine, did you take a more traditional route to get to company and general management, or how did you find your way as well?
I was also of the non-traditional route. I didn't come from a strong theatrical background. I studied art history and economics at college. I grew up as an ice hockey player, but I always loved theater. And I knew if I were to be involved, it would be behind the scenes. So I started off just pursuing opportunities that were around me. I went to school in Connecticut. So I started off at a small nonprofit called Goodspeed Opera, and kind of rose up through the nonprofit route. I did a management fellowship at Arena Stage in Washington, D.C. I did an internship at a small off-Broadway company called the Playwrights Realm, and I'm now at Manhattan Theater Club, MTC. So just by jumping from nonprofits of different sizes with different mission statements, I was able to kind of learn how to produce theater in that way and learn what general management looks like in that field.
Nice. And mine?
Yeah, I think the more I talk to my friends in my cohort in general management, the less I really believe a traditional route to general management exists. Similar to Amy, I had a lot of interests when I was in college. I only applied to schools where I could really be a liberal arts student, and I graduated with a degree in economics modified with computer science, and then minors in Chinese and theater. I had no idea what I wanted when I went into college. I was maybe equally confused when I came out of college, but what I thought I was destined for was corporate recruiting, investment banking, and management consulting, and did the whole process and realized I was not very passionate about it. I came out of college with an offer to work in financial consulting. It was a lucrative offer. My whole life was sort of on that path if I had taken that job, but made a very difficult decision to turn down that position and go back to internships in theater. And I interned both in nonprofit theater and in commercial theater, and ended up in a temporary job at Warner Brothers Theater Ventures, answering phones, and kept getting phone calls from a general manager, and started asking myself, what is this? Who is this person? What does he do? And one thing led to another, and I got a job at Richards Kleiman Inc., which is now RCI Theatricals. And now I'm an assistant general manager at 321 Theatrical Management.
So a question for all of you, do you think that having such varied backgrounds and interests coming into this business is helpful for someone who's looking at a career in company management or general management. I always say that people who are in the theater are the best customer service people on the planet. But do you think that having sort of a varied background was helpful for the conversations and dealing with and handling so many different people, whether you're talking about producers or actors, what have you?
I think so. I think the work of a general manager requires so many different skills. You're thinking both small picture and big picture. You're in the numbers, but you're also dealing with people. And I find that the folks who are successful in this field are the ones who come to it with varied experience.
Very nice. All right, so I'm going to go to some of the questions that have been asked. So the first is, is there a top or number one requirement for someone to become a general manager? Which hard and or technical skills do you find most useful and necessary in the general management field? How can you build those skills?
I'll jump in if that's okay. Because I always say there are two things you need. There are two hard skills you need to have to work as a general manager. You need to know how to use Excel, and you need to know how to write a good email. And everything else you can learn on the job and do. You also have to know how to multitask, right? That's, I think, the number one just innate thing that you can't really teach someone. And other than that, everything else you can learn on the job. I mean, it's really that, I believe it's that, there's so many parts of being a general manager that you couldn't possibly have hard skills in every way.
Yeah.
So, focus on those basics. That's my philosophy. I mean, everyone may have a different one. So.
And again, this business is one that has a lot of shiny lights, has a lot of sparkle in it. But there's a business side to this, and you four are truly those who keep shows open, keep theater companies open and running. What is the day to day like for you all? Michelle, will you take that one?
Yeah, I think the day-to-day activities is, well, right now, since we're in this pandemic, it's a little different. But right now it is a lot of Zoom calls. It's setting up, weekly calls with producers and looking at current shows and also future shows and figuring out what the strategy is going to be for those. In terms of it, there's been a lot of, scheduling and Tetris and here and there, you're stopping and you're going, you're pausing, and that sort of thing. So, but currently right now it is a lot of Zooming. And that's pretty much a lot of what the day consists of. And also just following up on emails and checking in. I think, as we are in this pandemic, a lot of it too is just checking in with everyone to make sure that they're doing well. Because this has been a very difficult time this past year. So health and wellness is very important, I think, for us as general managers.
Absolutely. There's a question from Arella. Can you talk about the difference between general managing for new shows versus long-running shows versus new productions of the same show, a tour of some sort? How does the role of general manager differ in those scenarios? I'm going to go back to Amy for that one.
Oh, okay.
Miranda, you're coming up.
All right. So for a brand new show, you are, you're laying the skeletal structure that everything will be run off of there. So you're building the team. You're having input into who everyone on the team is. You're doing everyone's deals and contracts, which is a big portion of the job up front that lessens up once you're in running and you're only dealing with replacements. A huge part of the show is up front is dealing with the physical production, the sets, the costumes, getting all of that organized. As well as the marketing is very different when launching a show and running it. Those tend to be, the things that take up the bulk of your time getting a show up. Once it's running, it's all of those things, plus it's the day-to-day HR of running a show. As Michelle said, everybody's ongoing wellness and various stages, and long-running shows, people leave. It's good for the show as a living, breathing organism for there to be people coming in and out. And so you're managing that as well. And then the marketing changes, ongoing depending on the needs of the show. And then you asked about additional productions of the same show. Oh, it's a lot easier to do it the second time. You're doing all of the same things, but you have that skeleton already that was established the first time. So you're either replicating it or you're doing often a reduced version of it for a tour or another production, but you've got that framework. So yeah, I'm gonna go with that.
Actually, Man, can you answer this one? Because you had so many different interests in college. How can you transition from another industry with transferable skills without theater-specific experience?
It's certainly possible. I think really the task of taking inventory of what your skills are and what the skills that theater employers are looking for are, and really understanding what your own elevator pitch is. A really big part of general management or producing is being able to sell a show. But to be able to sell your own skill set is sort of microcosm of that. So no matter where you're coming from, you're going to be talking to people. You're probably working with numbers in some capacity. I'm sure you've written an email in your last job. These are all things that you can really hone in on and reference them as transferable skill sets.
Apart from another question, apart from internships, how can you get your foot in the door for general management?
I like to try to talk to as many people as possible. When I go to the theater, I'll start chatting with the people sitting next to me, and you never know. I mean, people who work in the industry do watch Broadway theater. I've ended up meeting so many people just by nature of who I'm sitting with at the theater, or going home from a show and seeing that someone's carrying the same playbill as me. I try to talk to as many people as possible, and everyone knows someone who you should meet. And the sort of the links that networking can build are so important. Maybe even more so important than internships, but internships also help the networking process. Every meeting I've taken, I've asked the question, who else can you introduce me to? And people are always, I find that people in the theater industry are really generous with their network and their contacts.
Yeah, I always say to people, it's like, you won't get a yes unless you ask the question. So you have to ask people for an introduction, ask them to, if there's a way for you to get into this office or into that room. It's like, that's how our business is really based on so many relationships. So for people to understand that is good from the very beginning. Now Miranda, for you, how about this one? What is your advice on making the jump from working in nonprofit theater to a commercial general management office?
That's a great question. And I would probably like to ask the three other panelists there for that, because, my long-term goal is actually commercial producing. So the commercial world has always been interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
I think, a lot of the skills that I've gained and worked on developing in my nonprofit career are transferable to the commercial world. So I think back to Mon's point, it is a small industry. So in terms of jumping from one to the other, getting to know folks on the other side of the commercial world and learning what exactly they do, what skills they think I might be lacking coming from the nonprofit world, and how I might build upon those. And kind of just letting folks know that you are looking for work and to keep an ear to the ground for you. So, if anyone else has advice for that, I'm all ears.
The only thing I'll add is there are a lot of times that not-for-profit theaters partner with commercial producers on projects. And if you're at a not-for-profit theater and you're thinking about making the move, anytime that happens, ask to sit down with the team, whether it's the producer or the general manager for the commercial rep, and they'll be happy to sit and talk with you, and just, again, putting the word out to as many people, as Miranda said, as many people as that you're interested in exploring that. But yeah, there's a lot more overlap now than there used to be with working together, and I think try to exploit that as much as possible.
Wait, and Marissa Gottlieb is asking a question. Do you think it's important to try both commercial and not-for-profit management? Michelle?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the more experience that you can get, the better. Commercial, theater is handled a little differently than nonprofit, just in terms of overall budget and scope, and also just from the larger umbrella of how they operate their day-to-day activities. But I think the more experience that you can get, you should, if you have the means and time to be able to do that. Absolutely. Yeah.
I'd like to add to that too. I think there's also a significant cultural difference in working for a nonprofit versus working for a commercial general manager. Something I started in nonprofit theater because I thought that I wanted the community of different departments working towards the same show, all under the same roof. But I've truly found that in the commercial world, it just that community exists on email and phones, and we're in the rehearsal room, we're at tech at the same time, but is the difference of putting together a show with your coworkers under the same roof versus with people working in many different offices.
Well, and for you, Man, have you found that one was, and considering you're working for commercial, working a general manager now that is dealing with commercial theater, have you found that there's one that you prefer over the other, or?
I'm definitely much happier in the commercial world than I was in nonprofit theater, but disclaimer, I was working in marketing when I was at the nonprofit. I think the difference of management versus marketing is more significant to me than commercial versus nonprofit.
Question for Miranda, I think. We'll go with that. Yes, for Miranda. What are some expectations that you have for those when you hire them to work on your team?
Yeah. Typically, when I was company managing in person at MTC, our office was a very busy one, as we all are. But I guess to add to Mon's point, I think that's not different about nonprofit and commercial world is that at MTC, we do 8 shows a year. So we have 2 off-Broadway spaces and 1 Broadway spaces. So we do 3 on Broadway, 5 off-Broadway. And our team, we have a general manager, an associate general manager, 2 company managers, an assistant, and an intern. So it's a very busy office, and we kind of just feed off of each other. We're constantly opening shows and closing shows, 8 shows a week. So when we're looking to bring someone into the mix, I think, we're looking for someone who is excited about working in a busy GM/producing office. We're looking for someone who's eager to learn and kind of pitch in wherever they're needed. Sometimes, one of us will have to run to the theater to take care of something, so we'll need to hand off work to someone else. So someone who's flexible and really willing to be a team player with us. So I think, those are things that we look for, and just excited to make theater and have fun.
Very nice. And Megan Brose is asking, could you explain the process of becoming a member of ADPAM? Who would like to take this question?
I nominate Michelle.
I was going to say, I'm more than happy to take it. I'm sorry, the question again for the ADPAM specifically?
Yes, how can you explain the process of becoming a member of ADPAM?
Yeah, absolutely. So the starting point generally is that you would become a no-ma'am, which is an apprentice. Along the lines of apprentice, you would be an assistant company manager on an apprentice contract. You would have, I believe it is, and don't quote me, but I think it's up to 2 years to be on an apprenticeship contract. And from there, in order for you to move up into being a full-fledged company manager, you would then have to take a written test as well as an oral test. And then from there, once you're able to pass those 2, then you become a full-fledged company manager in terms of that. So,
and is there a usual time frame for all those steps?
It varies depending on people. I mean, I started later in my career as far as being an assistant GM, assistant company manager, as opposed to a lot of people. But I think there is, and Amy could probably quote me, but I believe there is a 2-year time period that you need to fulfill as an apprentice.
Yeah, it's somewhere around 60 weeks of work that have to happen over, no less than 2 and up to 3 years, I think is the 60 number is a little fuzzy, but that's, yeah. So it's somewhere between 2 and 3 years to get your weeks as an assistant in. And then they offer the test once a year, right, Michelle?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Once a year, and the NOMAN program is actually really great. You are in a program with not only company managers but also house managers, as well as press agents as well. And so it is a great networking way as well. And then you also get to have the resources of wonderful company managers as well. So
they do monthly seminars for the full-fledged members of IPANS do monthly seminars for the apprentices. So you're also getting an opportunity to learn things that you may not have gotten on your individual show.
That's great. Next question is about accessibility. Accessibility has been a word thrown around lately that people say they are taking steps towards. What previous gates in our industry are you interested in dismantling? How will you do so? What new roads do you plan on building, and how are they better? I'm going to go to Amy for this one because I know there's something that she's working on.
Yeah. Well, we have all taken quite a bit of stock the last year about how we hire, how we staff our offices. And, I think everyone, or at least I hope everyone, is committed to changing the way we work. There have been a number of, I'm going to call them community affinity groups. There's probably a better word, that passionate, organized folks in the industry, including 2 on this panel, have formed as a way to help people. We sort of say it's not a pipeline issue, it's a broken doorbell issue, right? How do people know where we are? This is one example. How are other ways? As you heard in the intro, T is the co-founder of the Black Theater Coalition, whose entire, I'll let you say it, but entire mission statement is getting BIPOC participants in every aspect of theater, not just on the stage, but in every department where there is not representation. And they're partnering with 6 general management offices to have a fellowship program of a BIPOC GM fellow that's going to be in, well, T, you talk about it. I should do it.
Yes. Well, a Black Theater Coalition, as Amy said, our mission statement is to remove the illusion of inclusion in the American theater by building a sustainable roadmap towards employment for Black professionals in this industry. And we are specifically for Black professionals. However, we also realize we have to put the oxygen mask on ourselves so that we can help others. We know that over the next years, as these fellowships continue, it will be a BIPOC conversation for all of us, because we want all of those areas that are off stage to look like the world around us. We want to know that Miranda is a producer on a show and that she will tell the stories that tell a human story, but may have a different take than a story that I would tell. We want to see these stories on the stages, and we want to see people who look like all of us and produce in positions of producing and general management and company management and casting and marketing, what have you, so that the industry really looks like the world around us. And yes, so we have 6 general management fellows that will begin, knock on wood, this fall with 6 different general management offices. And we're really looking towards the change that we are all saying we want to see in this business, and that will come from not only allowing space for participants and professionals in each of these areas, but to it'll help us build a new. My brain is shutting down now. I've been in a car for an hour and a half, and everything is like whizzing by now. But it'll truly help us build this next generation of professionals and allow us to continue to make the art that we love. That's as Man said, that is my elevator pitch for Black Theater Coalition for now. And along with that, the next question is an anonymous question. How can general managers and company managers be anti-racist in their work? How do you interact with social movements within the industry?
Gee, that's super exciting to hear about those partnerships with the GM offices. I just want to say it's, when I was first getting started, I did it the way Mon said, networking, letting folks know you're interested in theater and seeing who they know. So I think creating access to opportunities like you're doing, T, is really important.
Thank you.
So over this past year, I started an organization called Theater Producers of Color, TPOC for short. Also recognizing how hard it is for anyone to learn how to become a commercial producer. It's even harder for folks who identify as BIPOC. So I started an organization called TPOC that supports the next generation of BIPOC producers by creating access to education, training, and mentorship. And over this past winter, we created a 10-week course that allowed 25 participants to learn the ins and outs of commercial producing. So every week they heard from a different leader in the industry about a different topic. So we covered things from what is commercial producing, the large overarching question. We heard from Ron Simons. We talked about budgeting. We talked about development paths and raising money. So I think like what Black Theater Coalition is doing, what TPOC is doing, what all these other great organizations that have sprung up over the past year are working towards is a really great first step at sort of challenging the models and structures that were in place prior to the pandemic. And in terms of anti-racist practices within general management specifically, I think it's a really good question. One mentor that I have is a woman named Roberta Pereira at the Playwrights Realm, and I kind of look to her in terms of leading with your values. So in terms of concrete steps, I think the work that her organization is doing is really interesting. She is a mother, so she's started producing with that role in mind. So they're doing things from providing childcare during auditions for folks, to providing childcare stipends for creative members, to utilizing 5-day rehearsal weeks versus 6-day rehearsal weeks. So I think just looking at what practices are in place and considering how they might change, and of course all of those decisions have certain impacts, but really looking at what exists and how these things might be modified.
Question, Amy, for you, because you mentioned stage management earlier. What are the pros and cons of transitioning from stage managing to general managing? That question was asked by Yurtis.
Yeah, and I mean, I wouldn't call them pros or cons. I think it's more what it speaks to the individual. There are certain people who it is very important to them to be in the theater all day, all the time, and be that close to the art. There are other people that thrive with the satisfaction of knowing that the work they're doing behind the scenes is making that show better and doing it. So the jobs are they require a very similar skill set. And I just think it's whichever is more appealing to the individual. I've known a number of people that have transitioned from one to the other and vice versa and have done so successfully. So if you are a stage manager who wants to learn about general management, that go for it to learn a little bit and give it a try, see if it's for you, and vice versa, same thing.
Nice. For Michelle, as the industry is figuring out plans to reopen and come back, are there ways to meet industry professionals to begin making these contacts and relationships?
Absolutely. I think now is a great time to be doing it, since we are in this time and space where we're all sort of, a lot of us are working from home and do have a little more time available, which is great. So connecting via email, there's a lot of, general managers who have their own websites that you can always reach out to that will generally have an info if you don't personally know a contact there. You can always reach out to other folks in the industry. The one thing that I did find starting very early on in my career was that it is a very small industry and everyone knows everyone, which is so great. And everyone is so willing and embracing to be able to help and connect you one-on-one with a variety of people. So, but now is really a great time to do it. We do have some downtime, and it's nice just to be able to talk with different people too, and just interact with them and check in and offer the time and that sort. So.
And for all of you, what has this pause been like for you? Because again, we all know we're all hoping and ready for our business to pick back up and for us to be able to be back in theaters and in spaces. What was the first 6 months of the pandemic like for you, and what have these last 6 months as we begin to ramp up into the possibility of actually being in spaces, hopefully sometime this fall?
I think as general managers, problem solving is something that is key to our day-to-day work. And being faced with this challenge of the industry being shut down, we're forced to reevaluate our communication standards and how we work. And I think taking it as a general management challenge has been great in just making ourselves more efficient in that way. I think my office has learned to communicate much more efficiently while we're working remotely. And my hope is that once we gear back to being in the office, the communication skills we've learned from this downtime will carry over and continue to make us more efficient. As we ramp back up, I think there's just so much, we've had an opportunity to think outside the box now more than ever. And I hope that we continue to find more creative solutions as we think about problem solving.
Okay, and this one, similarly, what challenges do you face in your role? How have those challenges changed since the pandemic began? Are there any changes you've made to adapt to the pandemic circumstances that you will continue to use when the pandemic is over? So those communication skills for your office something that will stay and when you make your way back into your office spaces, the way you're handling each other, the way you're treating each other, the way you're speaking to each other through email?
I think there's always room to be more efficient. My hope is that we just continue to be more and more efficient and streamlined every day.
Is there anything that you wish you would have known about management or about theater as a non-theater person before you started your career?
That it's actually a really fun job. And I didn't know that beforehand. And this is just me coming from an outside, perspective of not really, being a part of theater growing up, and also just knowing that it is a viable job and that you can earn a living and have a lot of fun with it too. I think so much sometimes is the misnomer that it's maybe a hobby or a part-time job or something of that sort, but you are able to to establish a nice career and have a nice job and do what you love doing. To this day, my parents kind of still don't really understand what I do, although they are theater subscribers in Utah, but they still, I've mentioned it to them several times, or they'll ask questions, but again, they think, oh, theater, okay, well, I guess it's a job that she really likes, but I don't know really anything else above that. So yeah, but it's a great job to have, and I think that that's something that's been really fun.
I have family members in North Carolina who still call it play practice like I was 9 years old, so I totally understand that. Now, Amy, this is actually our second Zoom today. We spoke a little bit this morning that many times people will get into company or general management and they don't know exactly what it is, and then they are the question of, is this the area that I really want to be in? Can you all explain for those of us who may not know the intricacies of what it is you're doing in management? What are those things that make, as Michelle just said, that make the job exciting, or the things that may make the job feel like it's heavy lifting?
Yeah, I mean, as a general manager, for anyone who comes from the corporate world, right? A general manager is basically like the chief operations officer. They're this like the COO. The general manager is responsible for all of the business aspects of the show, and is in our mission is always to support the artistic vision of the creative team while working within the financial framework that the producers and investors have set up. So it's constantly a balancing act of those two things. And as general managers, we touch every aspect of the production. So even if we don't do it ourselves, we interact with casting, we interact with marketing, we interact with the lawyers, we interact with the social media people. So I always tell people that know they want a job in theater. They know they don't want to perform, but they know they want a job in theater, but they don't know what. I say, do an internship in a general management office. You will get to see every single aspect of a production. And if after doing that internship in the GM office, you decide that casting is your jam, or social media, or marketing, or stage, that's a win. That's not a failure. That's 100% win, because you got to take, we're the tapas bar, right? You can taste a little bit of everything, and find where you're really happy. And I encourage people to do that. And, it's a great way to just see all aspects of the other side of the curtain.
And with that, so what is your favorite part of general management and company management for each of you? We'll start with Amy, and then I'll make my way around our Zoom boxes.
This goes to something Mon said. I mean, I love problem solving, right? I love doing a crossword puzzle, a jigsaw puzzle, playing a board. Like, I love puzzles. And as a general manager, like when I have, unlocked something that was previously, that we didn't think I love to come into things and say, start with a place of yes and figure out how to get there. And sometimes that's harder than others. And when you really have a challenge and you figure out a creative way to solve it, and that you are able to give the creative and artistic folks what they want and still make it work in the financial realm, like I just have such pride in that moment. And so that's my favorite part of the job, is like really figuring out a tricky problem and with a creative solution. And we get to do that a lot.
Mon, how about for you?
One of my earliest mentors was the co-chair of the labor committee on the Broadway League. So I think I have a bias towards managing labor. I think it's just interesting that you see people as budget lines and contracts, but then they're also humans. And I think there's a bit of a role of being a caretaker in that sense, making sure that your employees, that's your actors and crew and musicians, and your contractors, like your director and designers, are all happy and working in environments where they can artistically thrive. I find that very fulfilling.
Miranda?
I think what's fun about general management is that you're really involved in a show from beginning to end. So at MTC, I'm the sole company manager for the off-Broadway show. So I'm at the theater 6 days a week, 8 shows a week. And so you really get to be involved in the process from first rehearsal to tech to preview performances all the way through closing. So for me, it's great just to, be at the show every night and say hello to the actors every night and kind of just grow with them as the production develops. So I think that's what's fun about company management is I go in the office at 12 and then I do all of my administrative work. Then I head up to 55th Street to City Center, get the show up, and it feels very satisfying and fulfilling.
Nice. And Michelle?
I would agree with Miranda on that end too. And to further, that discussion as a general manager, what's really great is you get to really start from the foundation. So you're starting with, from anywhere from a reading to, fostering it through to maybe a regional production, then going back to another reading of it, and then fostering it through to maybe an off-Broadway and then off to Broadway. So you're really like with that show for so long, and there's so much dedication, and there's so much that's so great about that development process, that you are in it so early on and you see it through until the end is really fulfilling. I really enjoy that.
Great. And this question again is for all of you. This is from Maya. She would love to hear about any time someone had made a mistake and how it was fixed. What helped you keep your cool, maintain your relationships, and keep the show at its best and safest?
The single most important thing is, as soon as you know you've made a mistake, is to own it and to, say the words out loud, apologize for it, tell people that have happened, and then start working on a solution, right? Because there are certain people that will just blame no matter what, but most people just want it fixed and want the solution. So, but you can't really start working on a solution until you've just owned that you've made the mistake. And we all do, we all will. And just, stop beating yourself, and own it, stop beating yourself up, and jump right into fixing it is what I tell my teams.
Nice. For Miranda, what would you, as this question says, is there something you would tell your younger self when you were entering the field that you believe would be helpful for you at this point in your life?
I think I did adhere to this, so I don't know if I would go back and tell myself this, but I've recognized the role of mentorship throughout my career. I've been very fortunate to have grown up with a number of producers and general managers who I still feel like I can text or email and say, what would you do in this situation? Or if you do make a mistake, have someone who you can vent to, or who can just say, it's okay, tomorrow's a new day. But when I was growing up through the industry, I think finding people you can trust and who you can share with what your ambitions are. For me, I did a number of internships and fellowships, and I always stress, I'd love to be a fly on the wall in whatever meeting you'll allow me to be in, whether it's a call with, a co-producer, or sitting in a nomination committee for at a nonprofit. So I think, for me, just trying to get access to as many things as possible and soaking everything up like a sponge was really important.
Very nice. We have time for a couple more questions. Yay! So Maya asked this, and she says not to bring up a hot topic, but she's going to anyway. But hostile work environments, both on and off stage, are currently being spotlighted by workers and audiences alike. What training or prep work is being done in your spaces to dismantle or better detect these situations? Seeing companies say they want to put in the work against racism, sexism, and different fights means acknowledging our systems have harbored or allowed these experiences to continue. So what changes do you see coming or are working towards?
I'll go. For the last few years, whether it's a not-for-profit or organism of a single Broadway show or tour, have been doing, sexual harassment seminars, but that's because they're state and city mandated, right? That's why they're good to do, but that's why we do them. And what we've realized is that is only, one element of things that we need to cover in the trainings world. And so I think when we come back, we're going to see much more extensive lists of trainings. There'll be unconscious bias training, there'll be anti-racist training, there'll be and harassment will extend to many, many more forms than just sexual, that all, I hate to use a legal word, but all protected classes of any kind. And that we need a different reporting structure, right? The sexual harassment stuff comes with a very state mandated, this is how you report an instance. We have not provided our employees forums for other methods of reporting. And that's, I think, what everybody's working on right now is how can we better, it's one thing to just stand up there and give trainings, but you've got to follow through and make it a safe place for people to bring things to management that come up. And that's where we really need new systems. But I'd love to hear what other folks are doing too in this area.
I would say, there's a lot of these really great online discussions that are happening in classes as well. Participation through like a LinkedIn experience of some of these diversified trainings and diversity and how to deal with difficult situations, that sort of thing is stuff that I have been kind of taking my time right now to do as well. and just trying to educate and explore as much as I can, because I have to take ownership for myself before I can start really, creating the work for and accepting the work for other people as well. So it starts with me, and that's what I'm trying to do right now during this time as well, is getting up to speed on all of that. So.
I have to ask you a silly question. And it's sort of that idea of your favorite child, of the shows that your offices or companies are working on. When you can get back into a theater, what is the first thing you want to see? Which show will it be of yours? Of your own shows. So what MTC is doing for Miranda, and what have you. I mean, I want to see Hadestown. I'm just going to put that out there. So
You're asking us to choose a favorite child. That's
exactly.
not fair.
But again, for all of us, it will have been, almost 18 months since we've actually been able to sit in a theater or be in a theater and feel that energy. Is there something? Okay, not one of not your favorite show, but is there something that you were looking forward to seeing before we pause, or is there something that sort of has been in your head? It's like, I want to hear this music again. I want to see this show on stage.
I think no matter what show we go back to, the ritual of theater is something that's going to be very spiritually fulfilling when we're back. I totally imagine myself coming to tears when I sit down and I'm showed my seat by an usher and hear the overture of a musical. I think it's something that we had taken for granted when before the shutdown. And I think the ritual of theater is going to be very spiritually fulfilling when we're back.
Yeah, I just House to Half is gonna make me cry. Like just that alone is. Yeah.
Absolutely. I feel the same way. It's like it is a community for sure. And whether you are a producer, general manager, front of house, backstage, on stage, I think we are all waiting for that moment that we can do what it is we do again in the spaces that we've been doing it. So thank you again. Thank you to the American Theater Wing for this afternoon about general management and company management. Thank you to Michelle Tamagala, to Amy Jacobs, Miranda Go, and Man Singh Tina for joining. This has been lovely. I know there are more conversations to be had, and now that I know how to get in contact with all of you, I will be doing so. Just be aware of that.